Hello, early birds. Just gonna wait for everyone else to join us. We'll start in just a few moments. Hello. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today.
Hi.
Hi, Soraya. How are you?
I'm well. And yourself?
Good. I'm bundled up. It's getting colder.
Oh my God. I have a space heater under the table and a blanket on my lap.
Oh my gosh, you're all prepped.
Well, I just when you don't move for like hours in front of a computer, I don't know, these British houses are not well insulated. Everything's
Yeah, it
always a
gets
little
cold.
damp and drafty.
Yeah. Here's a bit different. You're like in a concrete, you're often in like a stone block in Italian houses, but that means that if
Are
it's
you in
cold,
Italy right
I'm always in Italy.
now? Oh, I did not realize that. Where are you in Italy?
I'm in Rome.
Oh, well, how
Yeah.
fabulous. I mean,
Yeah.
not right now, but in general.
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh
no,
my
we're
goodness, I
actually,
had no idea. That's so much more fun than London.
yeah. Well, I think we're actually looking at moving a bit into the country soon, just to have a bit more space and air in this period.
Yeah, well, it's very attractive these days.
Yeah. Hi, Bernadine.
Hi, Bernadine. Oh my God, it's Deborah. Hi.
So we're just on our starting time, right on the dot. So I'll give people a couple minutes to join us.
Sure.
If you haven't been with us before, tell us who you are. Tell us where you're coming from, where you're located.
Hi, Frank.
We normally have at least 3 continents represented. It's our average.
Very impressive.
Yes, it's fun. Aberdeen, lovely. Hi, Jackie. Kansas
Oh my God,
City,
this is so great.
awesome.
I love this. Makes the world seem a little smaller,
Yeah,
bringing us together.
exactly.
I was thinking about this talk. Did you see that article in the art newspaper this morning about the ancient head that they dug out of a garden that during TEFAF online they're going to they've recreated it in VR. This
Oh, really?
yeah, Art Ancient, this dealer here in London, and I was just thinking about adoption of new technologies and the very old with the very new.
That's so cool. No, I didn't see that. That's awesome. I feel like I get so many ArtNet messages It's sometimes I have to dig through them, like every couple days. Find the
I mess
gold.
with you.
Exactly. Okay, so I think we'll get started, and then whoever joins us as they come. Tor, thanks for joining us. We just Soraya and I are on display for everyone to see. Otherwise, we'll be able to chat with you in the chat. So, a couple things about joining us on our ArtEvolve series. The first is if you'd like to chime in, we love having an active chat, hearing from you, what you think about the topics that we're talking about. So feel free to put in your thoughts into the chat box. Just make sure that when you put in a comment to click not just all panelists, but send chat to all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see it, not just me and Soraya, because that's no fun. Then if you have any questions that you'd like to be answered in the Q&A, they do tend to get last in the chat. So please hop over to, if you check over in your Zoom toolbar, you'll see a Q&A section. If you click on that, you can add a Q&A question. And then if other people also want to hear the answer to your question, they can just upvote it. So we'll answer the most popular questions first. So today's topic is, did pandemic predictions come true? The reality of art world tech adoption in 2020. So we're kind of starting to wrap up the year here. And our special guest here is Soraya, your last name, I'm sorry, is always Willa. Okay, thank you. Who is a digital strategy consultant who's currently working with Whitecube. So welcome, Soraya. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And as you all know at this point, I am Mackenzie and I'm the CEO at ArtEvolve. So it'll be just the two of us today. I'm very much looking forward to it. So Soraya, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Wow. I mean, I guess I sort of unconsciously fell into this art meets science many years ago, and I certainly didn't study it. I was an art history major, and I was actually, yeah, and there was a time where I was actually looking at going into ancient Indian art, and I was going to learn Sanskrit. And then I had an internship at Christie's one summer, and I learned about Indian contemporary art, and I thought, actually, that might be a lot more my speed. And so, I was always drawn to non-Western art in general. And that's how, when I began at ArtNet, though I was working with ArtNet, I was focusing on their non-Western gallery partnerships. Mm-hmm. And from that, I ended up going to Hong Kong to open Artsy's office there, and that was their first sort of Asian outpost, and working with all sorts of partnerships with fairs and museums and collectors and galleries all over Asia. And I've ended up back here in London, first with Artsy, and now more generally in digital strategy. And I guess along the way, as the rest of the world has also caught up with technological advances, and the art world is, I will say, always a little bit behind the rest of the world or the other industries. I guess I've developed a sort of a skill set along the way that can hopefully bring technological innovation to the viewing of art, and putting it in front of more people in a better quality way than we've previously done. And so right now, at this very moment, I am looking after Whitecube's digital interests. And that is anything from sales to internally how the company is working. And the pandemic was a really good time, I think, for many companies to look internally and see how they could work better and streamline processes, and also accommodate working from home, which in a very traditional, the art world is very traditional, and this is really I think a first for most every art business.
Awesome. I love that journey that you took there. All the that's great. Yeah, I also went from an art history background to a tech startup background into a back into art and technology. So it was nice to kind of find that middle ground, right? And I do remember in when I was doing my art history degree, they didn't have a lot of Asian art classes, and so I
No.
actually no, not at all. And so I actually forced my department to let me do an independent study on Indian art, medieval
Oh my
Indian art.
goodness.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
was the first person to write about Indian contemporary at Penn, like back in the
Oh,
day,
cool.
because they didn't have anyone doing that at the time. They only had antiquity. There you
Exactly.
go.
Yeah.
Small
So,
world.
yeah, I know, right? So yeah. So let's kind of jump in here. So the reason that, Soraya and I decided to have this, speaking to the audience now, the reason that Soraya and I decided to have this particular discussion between the two of us is because we kind of realized, if we look back at March, there were a lot of predictions that were made within the art world and within the world at large, but specifically, we're going to talk about the art world, about the types of technologies that people would start to use and how they would use them. And, I think there were a lot of big promises made that maybe weren't followed through on all the time, and some surprises. I think some things that were adopted even more than we expected them to be. Um, so we're just going to kind of chat about what are the new and existing technologies that we've had available to us during the pandemic, that were an option for us to use, that were in the predictions. So what are some of the first ones that come to mind for you, Soraya?
Um, well, I mean, the ever popular online viewing room.
Yeah, sure.
That was already a product that not lots of galleries, but some galleries were already using.
Hmm.
And I still don't think it's a very accurate, like online viewing. It is far from a room. It is just a more interactive web page, but that was the kind of thing that I think just a whole lot more galleries signed up for back in March. And I remember talking
Hmm.
to Art Logic, and they just couldn't keep up with the demand because a lot of people
Yeah.
were coming to them to build them.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so I think they grew quite quickly at that point. So I guess that was something that was already available that just had a greater urgency for galleries to adopt. And it's funny. I don't think that we can come out of this and say like there was one, clear like winner.
Hmm.
And I think I think a lot of us will agree that the companies that had already invested in digital
Hmm.
before March were much more better set up to continue operations and be successful during this
Yeah,
time.
from the
And there's been
get-go.
kind of like a mad scramble for a lot of other galleries to catch up,
Hmm.
because I think what this pandemic has revealed, I mean, across the board for all industries, is just the vulnerabilities that we have.
Hmm.
And for the art world, I think it is an over dependence on traditional channels like physical art
Sure.
fairs, live auctions, gallery exhibitions, and what's come out of this, I think, is the realization that developing a strong online presence is critical, and for in some cases the only lifeline that galleries have right now. And
Yeah.
that's for today, but that's also for the future. And if you look at other, if you look at retail, this is old news. And so I think this was sort of the push and the acceleration the art world needed to join other industries in using tools that have already been used to reach their collectors and their potential collectors and future
Hmm.
collectors.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
and when you think of like who those future collectors are, um, suddenly things like VR headsets and augmented reality don't seem that outlandish.
Right,
When
for
you
sort
think
of the
of,
new generations coming in. But
yeah,
speaking of AR and
exactly.
VR, I feel like that was a really big one. That's kind of the moment that the pandemic hit. the point that
Everybody had, yeah.
everyone was like, this is going to be it. You know, this is what we're going to do. Do you think that actually happened?
So I think all the ideas are there. I think the issue with these technologies right now is the hardware and the software. So, for example, during March, for several months in the spring, the company that makes the Oculus headset in China, the factory, was closed. And so there were no Oculus headsets on the market.
Yeah.
And so
there were enormous markups on them, I think, if I remember correctly.
And they were a fortune. And a lot of this hardware is still, it's really new, so it's really expensive. But the concepts are already there. And with things like 5G, I think all of these will become a lot more viable and a lot more commonplace. And so, yes, Listen launched, they worked with Augment to have an AR tool, and Hauser has their own VR, and Massimo DiCarlo has their VR, and Vortic, which is a company I assisted in launching. They're a platform for all galleries to use AR and VR. And they all kind of happened around the same time in the spring. Do those all have staying power? I would say that augmented reality, I think, will be an easier adoption, because not everyone has a headset or wants to buy a headset or put one on, but everyone has a smartphone.
Right.
Or not everyone, but
augmented reality is
most art collectors have smartphones and iPads.
Yeah.
And if you go to IKEA, you can put a couch in your living room, and you can sit in a car before you buy it. And so it's not new technology. It's just, I think, an innovation for the art world. But galleries do this all the time, and it's a really manual exercise. They'll take a picture of a collector's living room, and then they'll Photoshop in a piece. And this is precisely where augmented reality could really help, by taking a piece and putting it in your personal surroundings. And it's something that, as I think collectors become more tech savvy and better with their own phones, they will also, they're going to start requiring that. And thanks to Freeze, actually, I would say, in May, they made AR available for 2D works in their viewing rooms. And I think thanks to Freeze, understanding what augmented reality is it's probably a phrase now that more people are familiar with than before. And so I think AR is probably the one that I'm hearing more about and people wanting to invest in. I just noticed, for example, that the Art newspaper now has an AR feature on their app.
Oh, nice.
Like, it must have happened in the last week, for example. And I think that's something that it's gotten easier. It's less clunky. It's less expensive. Give it a year or two. I think that'll be quite commonplace.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see, because I think definitely, the commercial side of things, that's picked up quite easily because the use case is really clear. It's the idea of, trying this out before you buy, right? Try before you buy. But I would be really interested to see this also translated to more of the nonprofit, the museum world, where, like, there have been exhibitions that have been in public space that are shown through augmented reality, right? So there's sort of those, what most people would call experimental exhibitions like that. But I'd be interested to see that on a larger scale, right? To see more museums using augmented reality, just because we can't all go to a museum these days. So it would be great to sort of be able to incorporate the art more through our technology.
Well, I think actually, lives. I mean, this is one of these, the art world is one of these really weird industries where museums, like nonprofits, are probably leading digitally, which you don't usually see being the norm. But VR has been utilized in museums, I would say, for almost a decade. And it was a response. VR. And it was a response to their audiences saying, we want to interact with your collections in new and different ways. And I think the same goes for AR. I would love to put a Benin bronze in my living room on my living room table and
Exactly.
walk around it. And especially if I can't go to the Met, I would love to get up close to some of the works in the Met's collection. So for both those cases, I think what's holding them back right now is the hardware and the software and the expense, and it is expensive. But I would also assume as more companies fill this space and become more competitive, and as the technology becomes cheaper, that it'll be easier to use and you'll see it in more places.
Yeah. So Frank has a good question. He says, do you feel that the demand is there from collectors that justifies the price tag of AR and VR for galleries and dealers?
AR, yes. I haven't seen it in VR yet.
Yeah, I would agree on that.
But again, I would say I'm thinking of collectors right now, but when I think of collectors in 5 years, I think headsets will also become something they're more comfortable with.
As long as they don't go the way of Google Glass.
Right. As long as it's not Google Glass, but like, if you look at like in haute couture right now, they've invented a glove where if you put this glove on and your headset on, you can feel the material of a piece you're going to buy. So you can feel the leather or the sequins, and they're doing this with fashion. And so if you're going to buy that kind of an outfit, you also might be someone who's going to buy that kind of a piece. I think you'll just become more comfortable with all of these different technologies because they're going to be introduced to you, maybe not first in the art world, but in other areas.
Yeah, you can feel the Monet between your fingers.
The other thing I was going to say is another hopefully realization theme that I think has come out of this time is digital is important. Take it seriously for your business, but also the quality of images, how we are sharing artworks online. And so there's been more attention on the quality of a JPEG or the amount of images or the video content or sculpture. Sculpture it's very hard to convey a sculpture online. And so I think what's really interesting is 3D scanning of sculpture. And so that's rebuilding sculpture in 3D, and then you can embed it on a website or you can use it for 3D printing. But I think that's a really interesting area. I also think it's quite expensive right now, but it is going to be one to pay attention to because a JPEG just doesn't do justice to a 3-dimensional piece.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think even now I cringe when I see, things shared and the picture is blurry, right? I mean, I think just because we're communicating in this online space, the quality has to be there, right? So, and that's definitely something that's changed a lot, hopefully for the better. But at the same time, we're putting so much visual content online. It's something that has to be, very carefully managed. Otherwise it's easy to, have things that
lose it in the mix. Yeah,
exactly. Annika says, I love some of the video content I've seen with artist and gallerist interviews. Yeah, I think having more of the people attached to the art in the videos, that's been a nice change.
The behind the scenes, the artist studios, especially for contemporary art. I think, I mean, everyone wants to pull the curtain back and be a part of be invited into the studio. There is a sensitivity, I think, because not every artist wants to share their private space. And so I don't think it's for every artist, but when that's been able to be shared, I think the collectors, the artists, and the galleries have found it a really winning combination.
Yeah, and in the public space with curators who, kind of talk about the ethos behind their exhibitions and all sorts of things. I think having the person connection is a really nice touch, because part of it is because of how much more video conferencing we're doing and how much more comfortable we're getting with sort of being in the online space in a professional capacity. I mean, you know, who would think that you would get on a call with someone who normally you see dressed up to the nines in a huge suit and they're sitting there in a sweatshirt, you know? I mean, it's just a very different environment. It's like a different culture almost in some ways.
I was definitely on a call the other day with someone who had shorts on underneath their desk, and
Yep.
they moved. They had just finished working out. It was really great.
Yeah, I mean, leggings, all about that.
Yeah.
All about that life. So, yeah, I mean, I think, oh, and Annika mentions the collaboration. She'd like to see the collaboration with that, the content going further so that it's being used, you know, passing between the public and the private spheres.
The private, and also the I mean, the nonprofit and the profit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because sometimes these commercial businesses, they have the money to invest, and then, but they're using this imagery for such a short amount of time, and
Mm-hmm.
this could really go further and help other institutions. You know, I learned sort of recently that, for instance, Sotheby's, they've been sending VR headsets to collectors for private sales.
Mm.
And yeah, when I think that, it's like, it's an investment in the headset, it's an investment in the collector. It's offering them this experience, and then, you know, you just think like, well, if they can afford that and they can make that sale, couldn't they sort of play that forward if they have already set up these vendor relationships with headset companies, you know, and give back a little to the community so they could share in the preview of a sale, or you know, a show put on at a museum that not everyone is going to be able to visit.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, a lot of these museums do have their hands on VR in some way. They often have a headset or two lying around, often sometimes from donations from these companies. And so if there was something that was created by the for-profit sector that then could just be plugged and played by the museums, that would be really great. Yeah.
But I think unfortunately too, though, like, well, I mean, especially right now with a respiratory disease, I think the adoption of headsets is going to take a while, because I don't think people are comfortable putting them on. And if you're going to buy one and have them at home, they're like $500.
Yeah.
Yes, until they get less expensive. I don't think it's an area where companies will like really look into investing yet,
Mm-hmm.
or I would say they shouldn't yet.
Right. So maybe going more in the direction of AR at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So just before, we had talked a little bit about e-commerce and sort of the projections for what we would do with e-commerce, and now you know, kind of the reality of what has happened with those predictions. Do you think that the adoption of e-commerce has gotten to the point that, you know, everyone expected it to in the art world?
Well, you know, it's funny because there's always, you know, there's a disconnect, because the art world it's very much a people business, and most of the big deals are still made privately offline.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest deal for the art world was putting public pricing, you know, in their art fair booths for Art Basel and Frieze this spring, and demanding that of the galleries. I think has already helped with a shift in what the galleries are doing themselves, and what the artists are also now being more comfortable with. So maybe it's not e-commerce yet for the art world, but it's a higher price transparency, and it's also what the online buyer requires and demands today. So it's really, I think, just galleries meeting the needs of their clients.
Yeah.
I don't know that e-commerce, like as in transacting for a piece online with, you know, your credit card details, I don't think for a bulk of the market that's still going to be the norm ever.
Right.
But I think for works under a certain price point, absolutely. If it's an easy sale, we're more and more comfortable spending money online, and also feeling secure about putting our credit card details into different portals. I think last time I checked, the average price that people are comfortable spending online was $10,000.
Wow. That, I mean,
Um,
that seems like it's risen,
which is
in more recent time.
actually quite a lot of money to buy something
Yep.
sight unseen.
Yeah. So that is a lot. I think Artsy definitely has had a huge bump in this period. And I think part of that is because their average sales price has probably gone up in terms of
Yeah.
what people are comfortable with spending online. Especially if, you get into better return policies and things like that, and you kind of start to think of art more in the e-commerce concept and with the e-commerce structure, then you almost get more, it's less risky, right? It's not, I'm going to buy this sight unseen and then too bad, right? There's a lot more sort of processes and policies in place, I
There's
think, than
also
there previously were.
you're also being bombarded with opportunities to shop online, like
Mm.
even more so now. Like, now on Instagram you can have a shop. There's a Facebook shop, and on TikTok the videos will include shoppable links, and so
Mm-hmm.
there's many more opportunities. Also, we're transacting more and more on our phones, and so all these phone apps that are now also shops are just making it easier and easier, and making us therefore more and more comfortable with spending online.
Mm-hmm. And I think we've talked about this before as well in the context of actual shops, whether it's museum shops or gallery shops, about how that seems to kind of be the last thing to be moving online in many cases, right? And I think that's something that really should be a focus for the beginning of 2021, is every museum and gallery that has a shop should get it into the e-commerce space somehow. Even with a very, very rough version 1, right? Because it's a missed
It's
opportunity.
low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
It's easy, and a lot of these galleries publish beautiful books,
Mm-hmm.
prints, limited edition works, and if you can't go to the store, and you're comfortable with that price point, you would definitely spend it online.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is too, is if we think about the types of products that tend to be in those shops, they are home goods in most cases, right? There's some type of home good, whether it's a print or a coffee table book or a pillow cover or whatever it is, right? They tend to be home goods, and that's a huge explosion in what people are buying, because where are we spending all of our time? Home. We're at home.
On a screen at home. Yeah.
Exactly. So we want to like change things up. I mean, people are doing home renovations and home updates, and IKEA, I'm sure, is doing very well these days. So I think,
I've seen
if
actually a
we
lot
can,
of interior
yeah,
decorating companies, um, wallpaper companies, a lot of, because people are at home, so they're paying attention to their surroundings. They've all been doing very well.
yeah, definitely. So I think that's something to explore. Annika says, it would be cool to go to one place to buy merch from lots of different museums and galleries. So anyone
That
out
would be
there
really
looking
cool.
for an idea
That is a really good
that's
idea,
there,
Annika. You should get on that.
we should
Yeah.
add it to the list.
Like a place to go for like Tate stuff, MoMA stuff, Met stuff, all in one place.
Yeah.
Oh, the Guggenheim has a great store too.
Global shipping. Yeah. The
Mm-hmm,
Van
mm-hmm.
Gogh Museum as well. They have an awesome store. Company tried to make this, and Art UK also tried. Ooh, Bernadine, she has the dirt. She has the tea. I'll have to talk to you about that, Bernadine. Okay, so I think the next topic that would be interesting to talk about, which I did mention a little bit, is video conferencing and video calls. Now, there are so many webinars out there at this point that happen.
Yes.
Of course, you all know which one is the best, but and in addition to that, there are, every single phone call that we have often now is translated into a video call. Do you think that, our predictions for what we would be able to do with video conferencing have been actually completed? Are we at the point that we thought we would be with using video?
I mean, coming from an artsy or an artnet, like working on Zoom calls was absolutely the norm. And
Mhm.
most of us worked from home several days a week, all over the world and remotely. So um, those types of companies had more time, I guess, to make this more integrated in your everyday life.
Mhm.
I I don't. I still think that video, a Zoom call is just never going to capture the. I think what you lose is some of the creative brainstorming you get when you're in a group of people in a room and you can
Yeah.
bounce ideas off of each other. And
Mhm.
so while I think it's amazing that hopefully employers have seen that they can trust their employees to work from home responsibly and that people will have more flexibility, I wouldn't want to see a world where nobody went to the office anymore, because I do think you miss a lot if you're only on screen. It's also I find exhausting to look at. I mean, it's exhausting
Mm.
for your eyes, but also mentally, I think, to stare at a screen all day. And somehow sometimes the conversations, I feel like, fuse more together.
Hmm.
They don't, it's harder to differentiate, when there's no touch, there's no feeling that goes with the face on the screen.
Hmm.
And so, like, I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen companies, they've done like virtual happy hours, which are super awkward. Or, but you got to do something right now. I get it. But you're never going to get that. I don't think you can replicate some of those things, but just the way, like, I don't think that we shouldn't be looking to digital to replicate all our real life experiences. Digital is good
Right.
for other things and has other uses. And just like,
Mhm.
in an exhibition, it's amazing online that you can put, films of an artist speaking or them in their studio, things that wouldn't have fit in a physical exhibition. But you'll never, I think, be able to recreate walking around an art gallery online. And I think it would be a fool's errand to try to do that.
Sure. They complement each other in
Yeah,
a lot
they're
of
supposed
ways.
to the online and the offline are supposed to work together and complement each
Yeah.
other, but not replace either.
Yeah. Well, I think a big part of online going forward into future, if we're thinking like 10 years down the line, right, is about access and who has access to content and information. And I think that's a big thing that we've seen during this pandemic is that, you can go to webinars anywhere in the world now. You can go to events anywhere in the world because they're available online. So, I would hate to, if we go forward in time, you know, past pandemic, and all of a sudden things are happening in person anymore, and all those people who had access lose access, that would be a shame,
I
right?
don't think I
So,
don't think that will happen, though, because I think this has also set in motion a new a few new ways to do business and
mhm.
communicate that are not going away. And
Yeah,
as they've proven to be productive and efficient and successful, I think they will continue.
I hope so. Definitely. So, having those in-person events be recorded or even have a, online audience at the same time that the live event is happening. I think those kind of blended approaches, like you're talking about, that they can complement each other. Hopefully going forward, we kind of continue to look for ways they can complement each other, even past the point that we're all working from home.
But I think video conferencing aside, I think some of the things that galleries, for example, will have adopted now that they never would have, are things like, internally, like Slack,
Mhm.
like ways to chat and collaborate with your team when you're not sitting next to them, or, having cloud-based services, because,
Yeah.
when you're working from home, how do you work on a document together and collaborate and feel like you're a team? Um, um, Something like, a CRM, which seems obvious, but not every traditional art gallery would have something like that. And
Mhm.
so I think it's been a great time for maybe businesses to learn how to operate better. Things like ArtEcheck, for example, streamlining these processes and like simplifying some very manual daily tasks that just work faster
Yeah.
and better online, and it frees up your time to do other valuable things.
Yeah, definitely. Again, kind of, yeah, taking the best parts of it and incorporating it into long term definitely makes sense. So let's talk a little bit about social media and social media innovation. So I think, social media was also touted as one of those things that everyone's going to be doing it. It's going to be great. Do you think that happened?
Everybody's going to be doing it in what sense? As in everyone should have, their own feed and be feeding in content, and everyone cares to see what everyone's doing?
Yeah, I think it was kind of seen as, if you can't have a public space that's a platform anymore, social media becomes your public space in many ways. So do you feel like for galleries or for museums or, other art industry institutions, that social media was taken up by everybody and used in that way?
Um, well, first of all, I think what we sometimes misunderstand is, just because you have a huge following doesn't mean you have a huge engagement.
Mm-hmm.
And so there seems to be a preoccupation with, like, how big is your Instagram following? But if that's just people that join that don't engage, then it's actually not that valuable. I think galleries have hopefully been smarter about diversifying the channels in which to access their collectors. And Instagram is a great place to do that, especially in an image-based business. And so I think it has been powerful to shed a light on certain parts of a gallery's program or the artists they work with. I don't think you would want to put all your eggs in one basket. I think the gallery's website is their footprint online, and it also really depends, I think, on the type of gallery. There are some galleries whose whole identity is wrapped up in Instagram, and the two go together. I think I'm thinking of more traditional gallery setup, the website is still sort of the number one place you go to for their online presence. But then something like an Instagram is a strain and a sales funnel that leads back to the website. And
Right.
I think galleries have been smarter about creating that sales funnel and those leads that all feed back.
Yeah, in the online space, definitely. And I think for museums, there are definitely some museums that have really become very popular during the pandemic on social media.
Are you thinking TikTok?
I'm thinking about TikTok. Yes.
Yeah.
Do you have any favorites?
To be honest, I haven't put on my phone because I'm
Right.
kind of scared that then the Chinese will know everything, although they probably already do because I have WeChat. I think it's pretty remarkable that artists have been using TikTok to pay their bills. Like, I think that's amazing. And the thought that that would then be taken away from them if TikTok no longer exists in America, that's also pretty scary. I think it's shown that museums that are usually, I think, quite a they have quite a formal way of interacting. It's a playful side of them where they get to show maybe a little more personality and humor that I think people really can connect with and relate to.
Yeah, definitely. I think I mentioned this to you before, but one of the sort of most surprising accounts I've found on TikTok is the Uffizi Gallery in Florence.
I know I have to watch now that you said it, but I don't know how because I don't want to go on my
You can
phone.
find it on Twitter. You can find the stuff on Twitter.
Oh, okay.
TikTok videos are shared everywhere. But and for the audience as well, go check out the Uffizi Gallery's their TikTok account. It's wild. I mean, it's because their image, and I think a lot of the institutions in Italy in particular are very traditional about their public facing communications, particularly, and sometimes to the point that they won't even have a website, right? Or they'll have a very basic website that's attached to the state website, and that's it. There's nothing else, right? And now, the Uffizi Gallery is posting like funny pictures about nude statues on TikTok. It's very interesting because it's changing the idea of like a museum's brand and what it should be, right? Which I think is a nice thing. It's more approachable.
It's also, I think what's interesting with social is that with things like being able to buy through social and through, you know, an influencer on social that you follow recommending something,
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering more and more also on these gallery spaces, if those become the sort of the performative space, the experiential. That's where I go to experience art. But I actually
Mm-hmm.
am going to go home and buy art online. And
Right.
if there's this switch where now the place of commerce is no longer the gallery, it's actually, I saw what I liked, I went home, I experienced it, and then I went online and I bought it online. Just like, for example, you know, I went to a store and I tried on a couple pairs of shoes, and then I went home and I went to their website and I bought it online.
That has been the trajectory,
Yeah,
definitely, for e-commerce
and
and brick and mortar.
which like puts, I think, a new value on the gallery space, and it's an enormous overhead and sometimes a huge rent, and it sort of becomes a place of theater, and
Mm-hmm.
also as we do more and more online, what we crave are these, you know, in real life experiences. And so I just, yeah, I'm curious to see how that plays out for galleries and for museums for that matter. How, if that role is going to switch.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at the trajectory of e-commerce and large ticket items in sort of the retail space, so if you look at particularly high value electronics, that has 100% happened, because what people will do is they'll go into the store, they'll look at, you know, a $1,000, $2,000 television, and then they'll go and buy it online. So that's become normal. That is the norm now. And that's why
Right.
the stores keep their stores open. It's not necessarily that people are buying there, they're buying online, but they're buying somewhere, right? It's not that the revenue is not going away. So I
So
could
it becomes
definitely
actually,
see,
it becomes a part of the, it becomes another way to lead people back to your online presence.
yeah, it becomes a part of the sales process, right? Which we hadn't kind of accounted for before. So yeah, interesting. So what do you see as evolving with technology usage going forward as we head towards, you know, we're getting towards a year, right? So a year in the pandemic. What do you see as evolving?
Has it been this long? Um,
Not quite, but close.
um, I mean, from where I'm sitting right now, when I think of sort of where the pockets of growth will be online or in general, because I think there've been all sorts of interesting trends that have come out of this year, like we were like collaborations, for example. I
Sure.
think those have been really, really great to see. I think you've seen galleries producing content in different formats. So I'm thinking of, like, you know, Gagosian live streaming series with premieres, their live streaming series, or, you know, Twirner has his podcasts. Hauser and Wirth has community and these public engagement programs. So I think targeted content creation to
Mhm.
reach different key audiences, I think that would be an area that I would tell people to be directing their resources. I think there's also been some interesting work on all these galleries trying to differentiate themselves, because you're inundated by online viewing rooms from everywhere. And so I think some galleries have been quite clever in sort of creating some like thought leadership in different parts of the art world for themselves and owning those spaces. And I think that's I think it's a smart thing to do in general, because
Mhm.
it gets you great PR opportunities. It builds influence. I think it expands the perception of the market that the market has of you, and it's a great way to connect with collectors in a different way.
Mhm.
I think this idea of sort of a greener consumerism online, which we've seen in other industries. I think this will definitely infiltrate the art world as well, because I think that today's consumer, or the digital consumer, does have environmental concerns and is loyal to brands that they know follow through. And
Right.
seen this time and time again with retail. And so I think it's also a good thing. And I think that galleries are going to be paying more attention to that. And they need to create more sustainable practices and make people aware of them. And I think it's a great way then to also build trust and loyalty.
Yeah. I think those are some great answers. Do you think there's any specific technologies that, are going to be adopted more, particularly in the coming year in the art world?
I don't know.
We expect
I think everyone's really casting a pretty wide net to see sort of what will work best. I don't think a new technology, if I knew, I would invest in it.
Exactly. And I wouldn't tell you.
I do know of lots of galleries, for example, or art fairs for that matter, who are not rebranding, but redesigning their websites and rethinking their whole online presence. And so that's not a new thing, but I think it's a different way of thinking. And there's been a shift in how they, if the consumer isn't going to come to me, I have to go to the consumer. So how do you do that? You do that online, or you do it with these pop-up spaces that we're seeing, where you take a storefront in a city, or, Sotheby's set up shop in East Hampton, or the Design District in Miami in December. So maybe that's, I guess, where I think that, if this pandemic continues as it has been, and businesses keep having to find ways to reach their collectors and get in front of them and be relevant and differentiate themselves, I think it's going to be, developing those different channels to reach them. Yeah.
So all about developing that valuable content rather than kind of old, what we call old school marketing or outbound marketing, where you're kind of just standing where you are and shouting at a megaphone, right? You have to give them something to come to you.
Right.
Yeah. Great. So let's see, I think we have a couple questions here. Frank has asked, do you think permanent gallery spaces will exist, or will more temporary spaces be more normal, driving interest and engagement online?
Well, I unfortunately think a lot of galleries are going to have to close their spaces. But I think for a gallery, they're so wrapped up in, like, part of their identity is their space. And so I think when a gallery can afford it, I think that is a foundation for their brand. But much like we said, it may take on a new meaning. So it might be the place you go for the experience and the theater and the performance, but then you're actually doing your sales online. But I don't think, I don't think galleries will go away. But yes, the idea of pop-ups, I think, has always been around and will probably become more common as some galleries have to close, and other galleries who can afford it want to put art in cities where they don't have physical locations.
Yeah. Particularly as they realize by being online, they have audience in places where they aren't physically, right? That they would like to go reach. Something that they, just by the data.
Well, and that's what they used art fairs for a lot of the time. And without art fairs, you've grown this collector base in Shanghai, but you're not a Shanghai gallery. Might it make sense to rent a space temporarily in Shanghai and have someone on the ground there talking to your collectors? Absolutely.
Yeah, I like this hybrid approach. It's a good.
Yeah, well, I think the hybrid approach is what it's going to be. going forward. And it should be. It's the marrying of the online and the offline, and not making it these two completely separate identities, because then there's a huge disconnect for the collector as well.
Yeah, definitely. Any other questions that we have or comments? We have another comment saying a big thing for 2021 should be getting access to the right expertise. Good point.
Yeah.
Making sure these institutions are asking questions and asking them of the people who can help them to grow and to evolve. Definitely. Any other questions?
And yeah, having plans about, I think there's been hopefully a lot of sort of soul searching and inward looking for galleries to think, what is my plan? How will I move forward? And a lot of galleries still do work on like a, fair to fair basis. And without those, and without that huge amount of money they make at these fairs, how do we continue? How do we exist, or do we want to? And sort of having to be a little more nimble and consolidate and find your voice forward, which hopefully in the long run will mean some much clearer business plans as well, which the art world is not always famous for.
Yeah. And another question is, have art fairs addressed their problems appropriately over the past 9 months?
Oof. I mean, I think art fairs have it really, really, really tough. I think they have it some of the toughest, because one of the incredible things about the art fair was that it was sort of a watering hole from all walks of life in the art world, and it was those meetings by chance, and nothing is spontaneous anymore. Everything's organized, and losing those networking moments, nobody's figured out how to replicate those yet. And they're trying to do digital and online, but these are, when we were talking about traditional channels, this is like the most brick and mortar of all of them. Walking from booth to booth, but more importantly, when you're in the Messe in Basel and you're having champagne and you bump into someone and then you make a sale, like how to capture that online, I can't think of a way yet. And so, yes, I think art fairs we'll see fewer fairs next year. I think galleries will also do fewer fairs.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if that's the worst thing, right? To sort of maybe quality over quantity is it something to think about, in that you don't necessarily want to be going to 20 fairs in a year. And
no, absolutely not. And it was getting out of hand. Absolutely. And I think Frieze has been a really great example of a gallery really taking digital on and trying to innovate. And of course you can't replace everything that a real fair does. But again, like we said, you shouldn't try to recreate real life, because you can't. So use online to do different things where you can do that better.
Yeah, definitely. So let's see. Oh, we have a couple items here. Oh, we have a lot of items. Hold on, let me scroll up. Let's see. Hugo says, maybe we'll have less art fair fatigue with a hybrid approach, be able to experience the art in a less booth-based way. Yeah, that's interesting. We're just saying. Avril says, do you think artists will start shifting their practices given their work promises to be shown mainly online at the moment?
I think that's a real question and a grave concern, actually, because we were talking about how sculpture doesn't necessarily play out very well online, unless you're 3D scanning. And so does that mean people are going to stop making sculpture, and they're going to start making art that does sell online? And only if you can afford it can you continue to make sculpture. I think that would be a very sad way for this to play out for an artist's practice. But I've also definitely seen it happen. I've definitely had seen conversations where artists will go for something a little more shiny or that looks good on, and there's a term, Instagrammable art, where you're basically making art that looks good on Instagram. And yeah, I don't know what the answer is, but I think it's something to be super conscious of, especially for galleries when they curate and what they're asking of their artists to put online, and also not to force them to change their practice to meet those online needs. But then how do you support that artist? And I don't have the answer to that question. Yeah. But I think it's really relevant.
Definitely. So Oliver says, would love to know your thoughts about the Gallery Climate Coalition and how that will shift operations of galleries in the coming year.
Ollie, I don't know enough about it yet. I was reading up about it. Actually, they're working with Julie's Bicycle, and sort of what we were talking about, green, a more greener consumerism and being more like the galleries having more sustainable practices. And yeah, I think it is. I know several galleries who are already involved and many who want to get interested in it. I hope it's not just for the good PR. I think it's good coming from a really important place. And it's also something that some of these new technologies are supposed to help solve for. So, instead of shipping sculpture all over the world in crates and paying for airfare, a headset would be much less expensive and cause a lot less waste. Of course, headsets are expensive, and we've already talked about that. But as they become less expensive, yes, I think technology sometimes can be the answer to a lot of these sustainability issues.
Yeah. Well, and I think, something that kind of comes out of this is part of, these galleries going to so many art fairs, sometimes the sort of exclusivity of it gets lost a little bit. The idea that you're seeing something that maybe not everyone gets to see. And that's, I think, something that's kind of sometimes can feel special about the art world, is that you're getting, the sneak peek. You're getting to be able to see something that is only available to see for a limited time. So that might be something interesting when you're looking at this hybrid approach, is if you're really, okay, we're only going to do shows in Europe, we're only going to do art fairs in Europe, then everyone else has to access it some other way. So it feels more kind of that exclusivity gets added back in maybe to the picture a little bit with the sustainability.
Well, I mean, especially right now when you can only be with, 2 households outside or 6 people, or, everything's intimate if you do it at all. So, right. The real money and the private sales and the backroom deals, there's never a lot of people in that room. So
that's true.
It's always been an exclusive club. So for some collectors, I don't think anything's changed, actually.
That's fair. That's fair. I think it's more of the sort of optics of it rather than the actual, what you're talking about, but maybe almost making that exclusivity more accessible to other people too.
I mean, that's like the worst thing to tell the art world. But yes, I mean, the internet is supposed to make things more democratic. And in a lot of ways it does. It also allows the collector to see more and learn more. And there's more, it's an easier way to discover. And also, I think geographically to learn about art from everywhere.
Yeah.
Which I think is really exciting from a collector's perspective.
Yeah, well, I think it was interesting. I think it was Frieze that had like VIP viewing rooms with a certain number of people per tour, essentially. So that kind of, that small group approach. And this is actually, I think we have a kind of firsthand account on our blog. Emma will link that if needed. But that idea of sort of creating that small room concept online, it's not an exact equivalent, right? In any way.
Right.
But it does kind of allow things to feel, okay, I'm not just sitting here behind my screen with 500 other people or 10,000 other people. It maybe we can add in some of that intimacy into the online space as well. There are ways to hopefully that we can do that, particularly in the short term.
The last thing I was going to add was, I think what's really great coming out of this is the attention being paid to analytics. And I know that's not like a sexy part of the art world, but if you're going to be spending more time online and accessing your collectors exclusively through online channels, better understanding your online users' behavior is also part of the key to sales. And so I think it's heartening to hear how many galleries now ask for analytics and demand them, and also that they're starting to understand what they mean and how to then make business decisions based on them.
Yeah, I would love to see that kind of all across the industry for analytics to really be picked up. But that's something that we're very hot on these days. So it's you'll hear more about analytics, Marticheck, definitely. So thank you so much, Saraya. That was a wonderful conversation. Really interesting. We touched a lot of different topics and different parts of technology.
And everyone's super involved. I love it.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, everybody. The recording will go up tomorrow. We'll make sure that we send these links to you as well that we've kind of popped in the chat over time. And we look forward to seeing you for the next event, which should be, I believe, actually, it's next week. And it's going to be a really interesting one. So I won't spoil it, but keep your eyes out for the announcement because it's going to be pretty cool. All right. Talk to you all soon. Thanks, Ray.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.